My name is Justin Watkins. Really where I wanted the mindset to come in is how do we go from security experts that are always trying to learn something new to go back to the original where we started, and how can we grow upon those initial landing stones, right? So a few objectives and goals for the beginners. I would say beginners anywhere from 0 to 4 years in the industry, right? I want to be able to teach those individuals the importance of what can you receive and what can you get out of reconnaissance. Step number 2 is going to be understanding no matter what the skill level that the individual is, that there's always going to be more to learn. And that even goes back, like I've already said, to the very beginning, Nmap, open source tools. It's not all of these new presentations that we're learning about today and tomorrow, but what else can I learn about the tools that I was already taught about, right? And then of course, for the more experienced professionals, I want to kind of break the brain of complacency, right? So doing the same thing every single day. You walk into work at 9 a.m., you get out at 5. What else can you do within those 9 hours that you are not currently doing today? Don't want to spend too much time on this slide, but a quick agenda of what we're going to be covering in the next 15 or so minutes. Of course, I'll introduce myself a little bit more in depth. Very quickly, going to go over the penetration testing lifecycle, but more importantly, the importance of reconnaissance. We'll go into Nmap in depth. Again, this is not a tutorial in Nmap. If you want to have that, we can have dinner tonight. We could talk for 6 hours about that, right? Because there's a ton of different things that Nmap has to offer. We can't cover that in a 15-minute talk, but understanding that this conversation is more so how do I expand my brain to learn new things about tools and items that I already know about. We'll go into a few other open source tools that I've used in my career that have helped me on a day-to-day basis. I use them every single day, Monday through Friday. And then of course at the very end, if you have any questions, I'd love to answer. For those of you, I do have to apologize if you came for that awful mustache. It's gone. That was my quarter-life crisis, I assume, that I was going through. So roughly a decade of experience whenever it comes to cybersecurity. I am a U.S. Air Force veteran. Previous work experience with the National Security Agency. I was down in San Antonio. A lot of experience on enterprise level infrastructures with the NSA, and now I've primarily focused on SMB businesses, helping the small mom and pop shops understand what the importance of security is daily. I'm currently an offensive security lead for Solace. Whenever I'm not working, I spend enough time in front of a computer that when I'm not working, I'm outside hunting, fishing, or playing with my son and wife. Again, not going to focus on this in depth because this is not what the presentation is about. Today is really honing in and focusing on reconnaissance. So we all understand reconnaissance, initial access, scanning, maintaining, and then analysis and reporting, right? We all understand those 5 steps. Today is focused on what open source tools do we use every single day, and how can we beef up our experience and our knowledge on those specific tools. So whenever it comes to reconnaissance, I know that this slide is very much preaching to the choir here. There may be a couple of individuals that don't have a lot of experience on this field and are looking to get into it. So I felt it necessary to really get into what exactly can reconnaissance do from a day one perspective. The very first phase, of course, is going to be reconnaissance. This is going to be how much information can I learn about my client or my internal infrastructure before actually doing the test. We want to gather as much critical information that we can, improve attack planning, but most importantly, that 5th or 6th bullet point down there is going to be reducing the guesswork, right? A lot of times I've seen a lot of pen testers just go in and start scans with a Hack 24, and they're like, all right, let's see what we can do here, right? If we can have a better resource when it comes to reconnaissance, that not only shortens the time frame of the project, but it also allows you to focus your time on the more important tasks at hand, right? Is there a domain controller that we can find through reconnaissance? Okay, cool. That's what I'm really focused on. I don't really worry about the endpoints because I want to see what's on this domain controller, right? And then, of course, from a web application perspective, a lot of tools when it comes to open source tooling for domains, enumeration, subdomain enumeration, trying to identify what exactly is this web application going to tell me, and are there any subdomains that are left open that the client doesn't know about, my company doesn't know about, that we can go back and reverse. Today, again, preaching to the choir here, these are Nmap uncommon features, right? So these are features that we don't typically use on a day-to-day basis. Probably everyone in the room uses Nmap TAC S capital S to get a service scan, right? We all know the very basics whenever you either learn it one of two different ways. CEH tells you on day one through the textbook, or these are what every YouTube channel is going to introduce you to when it comes to Nmap. Nmap has a ton of more functionality into it. Again, can't do everything with it in a 15-minute talk, but I do want to key in on a few different features that I really like to use on a day-to-day basis. So first and foremost, we'll talk about the live scan. Very simple, TAC SN. A lot of y'all probably already use that. I'll go over the importance of the TAC capital F and how that can save you time in your reconnaissance phase. Looking at what vulnerabilities can Nmap by itself pull out, right? Because a lot of us use Tenable Nessus, we'll use Rapid7, but there's a lot of functionality and a lot of vulnerabilities that just Nmap by itself can identify, right? And then, of course, last but definitely not least is Mac spoofing. So how can we do a Mac spoof through Nmap by itself? So I'm hoping that these work the way that it was yesterday. Okay, perfect. So first demonstration, of course, is Nmap TAC SN. What that's going to do is all that that's doing is identifying what hosts are live. So whenever you receive rules of engagements back from your client, they'll give you a bunch of Hack24 networks, and you're like, all right, cool, where do I start, right? This is where I always start. This is my very first Nmap command, no matter what project it is, no matter how big the environment is. This is where I start, because this is what's going to tell me which IP addresses are up and active, right? It doesn't give you any information on ports, but it allows you to have a little bit of a starting point. Again, reducing the guesswork, right? This quick scan, this demonstration is going to show you what exactly is the time frame and the difference between a quick scan and a typical TAC SC scan. So you can see the top, and it's super blurry, I apologize. So the top is actually Nmap TAC F with an IP address, and then the bottom down here is just Nmap TAC S capital C, which a lot of us use for port service scannings and seeing which IPs are live. So this first one, I'm going to click it. I'm clicking, and we have results, right? So it's super quick, super immediate. This is really just what TAC F is really looking for is what are the top 100 ports that Nmap deems important enough to put inside of the quick scan, right? Of course, TAC SC is going to look at the 64,000 plus ports that are available to us, and it's going to find everything. So that's going to take a lot more time. So I'm clicking now. It's going. So if you just want to see, hey, what are the top 100 ports? 80, 23, 25, 443, 80, 80, right? These are the top 100s that could and most likely are going to be the most vulnerable in an environment. Again, as you can see, this scan is still running and it finally completed. So there's a lot of time difference between if I just need a quick answer, that TAC capital F, versus, hey, I need a little bit more information on this specific IP address. And then of course you can see down here, I'm covering it completely, I apologize. But you can see, you get a lot of SMB information. TAC SC, of course, is going to give you more information. TAC F is going to give you the answers that you need quickly. Next is going to be your service discovery. So I really like to use this tool and this specific argument to identify different services that are running on the IP address or the endpoint itself. So whenever I press play on this, it's going to run for a couple of seconds. This is not your quick scan, so it is going to take a few seconds here. And for those of you that are completely new to the industry, I'm talking to the 5% of you in this room. Thank you for coming out. But if you can see here, I'm using a combination between both Nmap, the GUI version of Nmap, and Nmap itself on the CLI, right? And then so you can see there, and it's probably extremely blurry, but what this actually does say is AirTune RTSPD 3077.40. Fun fact, it's my Roku device in my home, right? But Roku actually uses AirTune in order to allow for AirPlay via iPhone. So iOS AirPlay allows you to sync to your TV if you have a Roku device. So giving you more information than what you had before is what that TAC S capital V is going to give you. And then probably one of my favorite here, I added the little banner at the bottom to tell you exactly where they get these vulnerabilities from. Again, this is an open source tool, so we are not paying for anything. It is, And this is why I'm going to give you this example in particular. So if I press play here, the script is running. This is an open source tool. So let's keep that in mind. We're not paying $100,000 for a tool that you know is going to give you the correct evidence that you need, right? So whenever we get this result from this specific command, give it a couple of seconds here. It's taking a little bit longer than what I anticipated. So you can see once it's complete, whenever I'm talking about this as an open source tool, this is where you cannot trust a lot of what it's saying whenever it comes to errors, when it comes to positive, negative, false positives. Open source tools are going to have their flaws. You have to go back and actually validate, because what this is saying is, hey, there may be these three specific CVEs that we're tagging in, but they're all erroring out. Again, this is an open source demonstration. I typically do not trust a lot of what comes out in open source. I go back and verify those three specific vulnerabilities that I identified with that script. That's, again, just a very simple Nmap tac script vuln, and it's going to pull from that specific GitHub repository, scipag/vulscan. Now for the fun part. This is what I really like doing. This is more so for, your very basic red team engagements. I've said this 1,000 times. I'm beating it like a dead horse at this point. It's an open source tool, right? So it's very difficult. If you've got, an industry leading EDR system and industry leading, XDR, whatever you want to call it. I would not recommend using Nmap max spoofing for those types of engagements, for industry-leading engagements, right? These are for your small, medium-sized businesses that are just getting into penetration or just getting into the security realm. They wanted a penetration test done, so how do we help them, right? So what this is actually going to do, there's two different ways of doing max spoofing through Nmap. One is you can actually specify the vendor itself, or the second is you can specify the MAC address itself. The first demonstration here is going to be the vendor representation. So I'm going to press play here, and you can see, you can see that it actually gives you a UID of what an Apple MAC address is going to lay out. So I hope you can see it properly. So because it is very easy to question the reliability of some of these open source tools, right? So this is going to close up here. Perfect. So we got the same exact results that you did whenever we did the vendor max spoofing. Now to go and look at the evidence that we actually pulled from Wireshark itself. So the MAC address from the Apple was actually the 0003. You can actually see that the source was from an Apple device. I was on my Windows laptop. And then, of course, we are broadcasting to that 163 IP address. And then, of course, the bottom half here is spoofing the nulled out MAC address. The bottom here, I know a lot of people in the back can't see this, but the source is coming from that nulled out MAC address, also going to that 163 IP address. All right. To kind of put a conclusion onto this presentation, I felt it in just talk about Nmap whenever my description had multiple open source tools inside of it. So I also wanted to add a couple of tools here that I use on a day-to-day basis. And again, these are day one tools. A lot of them are day one tools that you open up a CEH textbook. This is what you're going to be taught, right? These are the tools that you learn how to use. CEH, OSCP, GPIN, they all use the same tools. So on the active reconnaissance side, tools that I love, we're all familiar with Burp. WP Scan, if you're finding a WordPress server that you're running or your client's running, I love WP Scan. It's not only going to give you what current version WordPress they're running, but it also look at all of the vulnerabilities that it could be susceptible to, along with plugins that WordPress currently has, along with the version of those plugins. Last on the active reconnaissance, GoBuster, Derb, Sublister, trying to identify more about what is the DNS actually resolving to, right? Can I go from google.com to google.com/admin because they have it open? That's what Derbbuster is going to look for, any kind of subdomains that could be susceptible to a penetration test or an exploit. Passive reconnaissance, Spiderfoot, and the harvester. So the harvester is very well used for any kind of emails across the internet. So it's going to scrape specific, whatever you want it to be pointed to. It's going to scrape different social media sites, so forth and so on, for potential usernames and passwords, along with Spiderfoot, really giving you a glimpse into what is your target directly speaking to, right? And then, of course, on the cloud side of the house, S3 scanner, looking for any kind of S3 scanners. Not only does it look for S3 buckets, but it also looks for S3 buckets that have manipulated or they have issues within the management with them. So they will find and try to identify vulnerabilities within. And then Cloud Enum is for Azure, that will allow for you to do the same thing that S3 scanner does, looking for mal-intended or mistakenly created different buckets within Azure. Any questions? Sir. So the question was, MAC address is changed, IP address is not changed. So that is something to keep in mind there, is that it will spoof the MAC address for you. It will not spoof anything when it comes to IP address, right? So again, EDR tools that they have in their environment, it's going to still track a rogue IP address and it will capture that. All right, well, thank you all for your time.